Okay, so it's January 12th, 2026. And right now, Iran is in a state of absolute chaos. We're talking fires in the streets, fury across all 31 provinces. The Islamic Republic is staring down an existential crisis. In this explainer, we're going to break down the anatomy of this revolution. And it's a story that doesn't start with politics. It starts with a number. This is the question on everyone's mind, right? From the streets of Tehran to the halls of Washington. Is the Islamic Republic, after more than 4 decades of iron-fisted rule, finally about to collapse? People have predicted this before, so to understand why this time might actually be different, we need to look past the headlines and start with one single devastating number. 1,420,000. That is how many Iranian rials it now takes to buy one single US dollar. Now look, that isn't just some abstract economic stat. That is the mathematical formula for national rage. It is literally the reason an entire nation is on fire. So what does this fire actually look like on the ground? Well, this isn't just another protest. Not even close. Analysts are already calling it the January Revolution, and the scale of it, it's completely unprecedented. You know, this whole thing kicked off on December 28th, 2025. It started as a strike, just some bizarre merchants who were furious about the insane cost of bread. But it escalated, fast. It stopped being about one policy and started being about the entire system. And it just spread like wildfire to every single one of Iran's provinces. And the signs of this total upheaval are everywhere. You've got massive protests in the capital, Tehran, sure, but also in the holy cities of Mashhad and Qom, and even in restless regions like Zahedan. The regime's response? Well, they're calling their own people terrorists. But here's the really interesting part, that last point. We're getting reports trickling out that some security forces, especially the regular army, are refusing orders to crack down on the protesters. That, right there, is an absolute game changer. Now, a fire this big doesn't just start out of nowhere. The rage has been simmering for years, but a series of absolutely catastrophic events over just the last 12 months, well, they pushed Iran right over the edge. Let's dig into the anatomy of this collapse. This timeline here, it really shows you how fast everything fell apart. First, back in June 2025, you have a disastrous 12-day war with the US and Israel. It left Iran's nuclear site shattered and its military completely humiliated. Then, by September, that war triggered the full restoration of crippling UN snapback sanctions. That just cut off whatever economic lifeblood the country had left. And just 3 months after that, the streets exploded. And this is where all that geopolitics hits home. General inflation is over 52%. I mean, that's bad enough. But look at food prices, up 70%. 70! When you can't afford to put food on the table for your family, suddenly the fear of the secret police, it just starts to evaporate. This isn't about ideology anymore. This is about survival. But you know, maybe the most telling sign of the regime's weakness isn't coming from the protesters on the streets. It's coming from inside the halls of power. It really seems like the leadership themselves don't believe they can win this. This is just stunning. Leaked intelligence reports are suggesting that the 86-year-old Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has okayed a Plan B, a plan for him and the rest of the top leadership to escape to Russia if the capital falls. I mean, think about that. When a government starts planning its own exile, that's a pretty clear signal that they think the end is near. So ultimately, the regime's fate comes down to its military, which is deeply, deeply divided. On one side, you have the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard. These guys are the ideological shock troops, totally loyal to the clerics. They're the ones who do the dirty work. But on the other side, you have the Artesh, the regular army. These are basically nationalist conscripts who historically have been really reluctant to fire on their own people. Their loyalty to the nation over the leader, that's the one question that could decide everything. And there's another huge factor at play here. The Trump administration in Washington has drawn a very clear red line. Any attempt by the regime to pull a Tiananmen Square-style massacre will be met with direct U.S. airstrikes. This pretty much takes the regime's most brutal option right off the table. So the regime is cornered, their options are limited, and their own leadership is looking for the exits. What happens next? Well, most experts see 3 main scenarios for Iran's future. Okay, scenario 1 is the grim one, the Iron Fist. Basically, the IRGC decides the clerics are too weak, shoves them aside, and sets up a formal military junta. Iran would probably become a pariah state, completely cut off from the world, and they'd start a brutal internal purge. Think something like North Korea. Scenario 2 is the one people are hoping for, a managed transition. In this future, the regime collapses and the regular army, the Artesh, steps in to keep things from falling into chaos. They could back a transitional government, maybe with figures like the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, with one goal: organize a national referendum on what Iran should become next. And then there's scenario 3, and frankly, it's the darkest: fragmentation. If a power vacuum opens up in Tehran, the whole country could just splinter apart. Ethnic unrest in places like Kurdistan and Baluchistan could explode. You'd get a Syrianization of Iran, a catastrophic, multi-sided civil war that sucks in all the neighboring countries and could last for years. Now, I know what you might be thinking. People have risen up in Iran before, right? Most recently and famously in 2022. So the question is still, why is this time different? Why does this 2026 uprising feel so much like the endgame? Well, the difference between then and now is just profound. The 2022 protests were a heroic fight for social freedom, all under that powerful banner of woman, life, freedom. But this, the 2026 uprising, is a fight for literal survival. It's the perfect storm of economic death, exhaustion from a lost war, and that shocking revelation that the leadership itself is ready to abandon ship. Whether the Islamic Republic survives this winter, well, it's not really in the hands of the clerics anymore. It's in the hands of millions of ordinary Iranians who have all reached the same terrifying conclusion. And that leaves us with one final, urgent question. What happens when a people have nothing left to lose?